plants actually have anti-nutrients which can block out the absorption. So there was a study with zinc in oysters. Oysters are the best dietary source of zinc by a country
Mm.
mile, and beef is second best. But beef is about 10% the zinc content per gram as oysters, so it's a big drop from 1 to 2. And so they gave people, group of people, a certain amount of oysters, and they measured their blood levels of zinc a couple hours afterwards, and sure enough, zinc levels went higher, a lot higher. And then they gave another group the same number of oysters, but with black beans. You think, oh, okay, well, they're having more food and their vegetables. Oh, great, even more nutrients. Well, actually, no, because they found that they only had 25% of the zinc elevation that the other group did. So the black beans blocked out 75% of the absorption of zinc. And if you're blocking out the absorption of zinc, you're likely blocking out the absorption of other things.
I have to say, the way I got into the carnivore diet, I'm so first of all, I'll explain to you where I'm at with it. I can't say that I'm fully carnivore. I've been dabbling for months, and I came across a sentence on your How to Carnivore Challenge website, because I know you do like a carnivore challenge, with people online. And the first sentence is literally the last 10% makes all the difference. When you eliminate all plant foods, you truly become superhuman. So I feel like you're talking to people like me in that sense, like people who are dabbling in carnivore, but just haven't taken it the full hog yet. So, I mean, I love that statement. And I love how you say going carnivore, you become superhuman. I mean, that's a big thing to say, right?
Yeah, well, it, it sounds facetious and it sounds hyperbolic, but I actually mean it quite literally because your body actually works very differently than everybody else on Earth. You're in a very different metabolic state. Your body can utilize energy much better, and you're not poisoning yourself. We don't realize just how damaging it is to our bodies and our health what we're putting into our bodies. We think that food is food, it's just calories and calories in and calories out, and that's the only thing that matters. And of course, that's not true. We have all sorts of different chemicals that get into our body and cause all sorts of different disruptions. And when you get rid of all of those things and you actually see how your body is supposed to work naturally and should work all the time, you realize just what a stark contrast that is, and how your body has not been working the way it's supposed to, and how you have not been feeling the way you're supposed to your entire life. And it often upsets people. It upset me. I was furious when I realized that, and I looked back on my life and realized that I felt like garbage my entire life as compared to what I should have felt like. And that's coming from someone who's played professional sports, has been at the upper echelons of athletics and academics my entire life. And then I looked back and said, I felt like garbage. I was in brain fog and my body hurt the whole time. And like that's ridiculous. And so I was fighting against this damage that I was doing to my body without even realizing it. I was sort of pushing through without without understanding what I was doing. I just thought that was normal. Everyone thinks it's normal. It's just, oh, well, you work out and you're sore for the next 4 days, or you do a really hard workout and you might be sore for 2 weeks, and you have to ease into it and all these other sorts of things. That's not true. That's just not true. That's one of the things that people off is when I say that you don't get the delayed onset muscle soreness as an athlete when you are fully carnivore, because it's those inflammatory factors and toxins that are in plants and other chemicals that go into our body through the so-called food that we eat, which is not real food because food is species specific. Lettuce and cabbage are not food to a lion or even a zebra. They don't eat those plants in their natural diet. And so that's not food for them, and it's not food for us. Just because we put it in our mouth and chew does not mean that it's food. And so those chemicals that we're putting in our body cause inflammation, they cause stress, they cause damage, they cause pain. And that's the plant's way of warning you and telling you, hey, don't eat me. I'm going to hurt you. Back off. And when you eliminate all of those things from your diet, all of a sudden that inflammation is gone. and that pain can go away as well. And so I noticed that I just wasn't getting the delayed onset muscle soreness. I thought I was just maybe not working out as hard. So I was pushing myself harder and harder and harder. I was doing, 10 sets, 20 sets, 30 sets, and I'm doing 32 sets of squats to failure. And I still couldn't get sore the next day. And that was very eye-opening for me. And it ended up my workouts were then sets of 20. So I do 20 sets of bench, 20 sets of incline, 20 sets of dips, 20 sets of flies, 20 sets of shoulder
You must have
press,
had a
20
lot of
sets
time on
of
your hands.
squats. I did actually because I was taking
Yeah.
some time off at the time. So I was doing like 3-4 hour workouts,
Mm.
and deadlifts, everything. All the major lifts I was doing 20 sets of 20, and I capped it at 20, even though I could have kept going just because it's already absurd to do 20 sets of something. And so I was just like, all right, well, that's where I'm going to limit it. But I felt great doing it. And the more I did, the better I felt because when you're in a ketogenic state, you make energy for the demand. And
Mm.
so I didn't need to take a pre-workout drink or caffeine or Monster or whatever in order to get energy so that I felt energized to work out. I got more energized the more I worked out because you generate energy. And as you're in ketosis, you generate energy for what you're doing. And when you burn more energy, you feel better. And so the
Mm.
harder I worked, the better I felt. And so the harder I wanted to work because I felt
Yeah,
even better. And so I just wanted to keep going. And so it wasn't that I was like, oh, I got through a hard workout. Yeah, I feel better for having done that. I felt better doing it. And I didn't want to
nice.
stop doing it. So I just wanted to keep working out and keep working out. And so, but I would cap it at 20 because again,
Because it's
it's
just
just
too, it's
past the
20,
point of
then it's
absurdity
just
already.
21. And it's like, when do you
Yeah.
stop? So I mean, going back, because obviously I want to dive into, what the carnivore diet is, just to clarify for people who aren't probably sure about what it is. But you say that you do not get DOMS. So I'm just stuck on that point. You don't get DOMS when you're on the
Mhm.
carnivore diet because it is so
No.
anti-inflammatory, and it like you just don't get that
Yeah.
soreness in your muscles ever, ever.
Yeah. So if you are really, really, really clean,
Really clean.
if you
And
have a cup of coffee, you'll be sore.
oh,
And
interesting.
so that's the thing because coffee has a lot of inflammatory factors, a lot of inflammatory factors. Coffee beans are seeds, and a seed is a plant's baby, and everything protects this
Mm,
baby more than
ah,
anything. And so the seeds and beans and nuts, legumes, this is where you'll find the highest concentration of toxins in any given plant generally. And so that's some of that gets denatured when we cook them, roast them, boil them, and all these other sorts of things, but not everything. And so you can even tell by the taste. If it tastes bitter, that's your tongue and your brain, which are sophisticated machines, warning you that there are chemicals coming in that's not what you should have. So that strong bitter taste is actually a warning that there's something coming in that you shouldn't let in. That's why it tastes bad, and that's why we have taste. Now, other things can taste good and not be good for you because you have very
mm,
clever food scientists that have spent billions of dollars making absolute garbage, highly palatable and addictive to eat. And but that's different. That's not a natural food source.
mm,
So things like sugar can exist naturally, but sugar is a drug. It's the plant uses that to make a bit of a reward, so you get a bit of energy, so that you do something for it, like move its seed around. But getting it in the quantities that we get now and refining sugar and all these other sorts of things is way out of proportion with how we would normally find it in nature. You have fruit that would be semi-sweet, if not even mostly sour in the wild, and it would be available for a few weeks out of the year, and then that's it, and that's only in certain climates. And so it's very much out of proportion. But if something tastes bad, that's a good sign that it's not good, that it's bad for you, that your
right.
brain is warning you, hey, there's something bad here. Don't do that. Spit it out. Like if a kid is going to spit something out, like a baby, you should probably think twice about eating it yourself. But
Mm,
again, things can be turned to be addictive and compulsive to eat and aren't good for you. But that's different. That's manipulating the chemicals. But when you take in those chemicals, they cause inflammation, they cause harm, and that can be expressed and manifest as pain. So a carnivore diet is a very anti-inflammatory diet for two reasons. One, for that express reason that you're actually eliminating out a lot of things that cause inflammation, like grains and carbs and sugar, and all these things cause oxidative stress and inflammation, damage the mitochondria, slow down their use. This can actually physically damage mitochondria, suppress the replication and repair of mitochondria as well, and other sorts of depressing other sorts of cellular functions. But they cause inflammation. So you're eliminating those out. But then when you're in a ketogenic state, higher levels of ketones directly suppress inflammation because like beta hydroxybutyrate, which is one of the ketone bodies that we produce predominantly, directly suppresses something called the NLRP3 inflammasome, which causes inflammation. So these two
Mm.
things combined, you're bringing in less inflammation, and now what little is left, you're suppressing with ketones. You really just don't feel these DOMs, and I've sort of noticed that those DOMs really are just the plant toxins warning you, saying, "Hey, don't eat me. I'm going to hurt you." And when you eliminate those completely, you will eliminate the soreness. Now you might feel a bit tighter, like, okay, I guess I sort of
You'll
did
feel
something there. But
something,
if you're
yeah.
really clean with it, yeah, just sort of like, okay, I guess there was something there. But if you're really clean with it, you won't feel anything. I did bench yesterday for the first time in weeks,
Yeah.
weeks and weeks. I actually was just thinking about it this morning. I was like, it feels like I have done nothing.
Oh
I
my
have
gosh.
absolutely no
And were you
sensation that
lifting
I've done
heavy?
anything.
Like were you lifting heavy
Yeah,
and you were
always,
pushing yourself and or like
always go to
always?
failure.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, every set to
And you don't
failure
feel
every
a
time.
thing. Yeah.
No, don't feel a thing.
So you've said if you go really, really clean. So
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
kind of leads me to the question of, what is the carnivore diet? Because I know there are kind of different versions. So someone says, you have animal protein, eggs, and dairy, and some people say, oh, it's just meat, and some people say, oh, add some honey and some fruit. And so what's your version? What is the carnivore diet to you?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, a lot of people take the carnivore diet to mean just eat a lot more meat. And then
Hmm.
they don't understand. We'll say, well, I'm feeling better for these reasons, but I'm not getting all these benefits that everybody else talks about. It's like, okay, well, what else are you eating? And they're typically eating a lot of things. It's just that a lot of what they're eating is meat, or they're eating a lot more meat than they've ever eaten before. And the carnivore diet really is an elimination diet in its in a way, because you're eliminating out all these different things that can cause harm. So it's not enough to just eat more meat. Now that's great, because that's the food and nutrition that we require. People think that, well, you need fruits and vegetables. That's where you get the nutrients from. It's actually quite the opposite. Meat is where you get everything that you need, especially fatty meat, because you need the fat for the fat soluble nutrients, and the fat itself is a nutrient. But the plants actually have anti-nutrients which can block out the absorption. So there was a study with zinc in oysters. Oysters are the best dietary source of zinc by a country
Mm.
mile, and beef is second best. But beef is about 10% the zinc content per gram as oysters, so it's a big drop from 1 to 2. And so they gave people, group of people, a certain amount of oysters, and they measured their blood levels of zinc a couple hours afterwards, and sure enough, zinc levels went higher, a lot higher. And then they gave another group the same number of oysters, but with black beans. You think, oh, okay, well, they're having more food and their vegetables. Oh, great, even more nutrients. Well, actually, no, because they found that they only had 25% of the zinc elevation that the other group did. So the black beans blocked out 75% of the absorption of zinc. And if you're blocking out the absorption of zinc, you're likely blocking out the absorption of other things.
Mm.
And then they gave another group same number of oysters, but with corn tortillas. And that group had no rise in zinc at all. So
Oh,
100% of the zinc was blocked out from absorption.
wow.
And
You just don't
again, you're
think
going
of
to block
that.
out other things too. And you don't
Yeah.
think about it. You think, oh, I'm eating more. I'm eating a
Yeah,
more
you're eating
diverse
more, so
plate. There's
therefore you
more
must have
colors. There's more things.
lots of
Yeah.
nutrients, and it's all going in. But actually, you don't think how
Hmm.
they interact with each other, like how
Yeah.
beans could block zinc, for example. I mean, I've
Hmm.
I've heard you say that vegetables are a junk food, And I have to say, like, I admire you for saying that because that you must get so much pushback when you say things like that because it's so, because I come from the functional medicine kind of space. So, I'm going on the functional medicine journey at the moment, and it's out there, it's very reputable, it's very respected, and it's all about color and it's all about, how sulforaphane lowers estrogen in women. So eat lots and lots of broccoli, and how almonds are so great for your lifespan. And and we're so told, and we're told to eat, all the colors of the rainbow, and that's just what we're used to. Eat fiber, it's great for your digestion, and it's so ingrained in us. And I have to be honest, Anthony, like I still feel a little bit that way. Like I still feel oh, when I try and go carnivore, I'm definitely going down the scale of carnivore. Like I'm getting closer and closer, but I'm finding it difficult to eliminate those last vegetables. Because I'm like, well, they got to be good for you though, right? So when you say plants are junk
Mhm,
food, I can imagine you get a lot of pushback on that and a lot of criticism,
mhm.
but you're used to it.
Yeah, sometimes, but the thing is that when people try it, they see exactly what I mean. And when you look at the objective reality, then it becomes a lot more clear. We have categorized, classified, and named nearly 1 million defense chemicals that plants make in order to deter animals and insects from making them. So this is a hard science, and there's a huge
Mm.
body of knowledge behind this. They're going back thousands of years on the toxic nature of plants. It's only until very, very recently that we started pushing this plants are all, sent from God. Literally, that comes from a religious organization called the Seventh-day Adventist Church, who had a religious leader named Ellen G. White in the 1800s, who had, she says she had a vision from God that said that meat was sinful because it caused lustful feelings. And this was a sentiment in the 1800s, starting in the early 1800s, that people that ate more meat actually had more lustful feelings. This is sort of the Victorian era where they're saying lust is just the worst thing on earth, and self-vice, which was masturbation, was literally, they thought this was literally the worst affliction on the world right now, and this was going to cause the end of the world. This is a time with all sorts of, different sorts of Napoleonic wars and civil wars and the French Revolution and all these other sorts of things going on. And I'm sorry, but like the fact that you think that masturbation is the worst thing on earth, you must live a blessed life if that is the worst thing
That's all you're
that could
focusing
ever
on,
happen.
right?
Yeah, exactly. And so that was their focus. And so they were saying that this was a horrible, horrible thing, self-vice and premarital sex and all this sort of thing. And so this was pushed by a lot of people throughout the 1800s, late 1700s, 1800s. And then Ellen G. White codified this in religion and said, God said so. God said you must stop eating meat because meat is sinful. Meat causes lust, and lust is a sin. Therefore, meat is a sin. Stop eating it. She was extremely influential. She wrote dozens of books. They've been translated into nearly every language, hundreds of millions of copies, around the world over the years. And her protege was a young man named John Harvey Kellogg, who grew up to be Dr. Kellogg and founded Kellogg cereals. He was extremely influential. He's an extremely famous doctor in America. He was literally a doctor to the stars. Presidents went to him, congressmen, senators went to him. Henry Ford went to him, Rockefeller went to him, Carnegie went to him. He was an extremely influential man. And he pushed this plant-based narrative, and he started Kellogg's cereals in order to find plant-based alternatives for meat. And so this is where this divine aspect came to plants and how wonderful they are. And one of the early nutritionists and lady named Lena Cooper, she was a Seventh-day Adventist church member in the early 1900s, and she founded the American Nutrition Dietetics Association, and she founded it on plant-based, divine plant-based principles and how meat was sinful and awful. So this was baked into the institutions
Mm.
from day one. And she wrote one of the first university textbooks on nutrition in 1925, which again was just all plant-based. So they've been extremely influential. They're still doing this. There's a specialty in medicine called lifestyle medicine. It's not really a specialty because you don't do a residency. It's like an online training course. It takes like, 20 hours to do, but it's sort of a certification. And it's all about diet and lifestyle. So it's a lot of principles from functional medicine or other sorts of things where you say, okay, let's address this with diet and lifestyle and try to make you as healthy as we can that way, and then we'll fill in the gaps with medicine. Totally agree with that. That is the basis of my practice, that principle. But their diet was pushing a vegan diet, and in fact, it pushes the Garden of Eden diet. We have to eat what Adam and Eve ate,
Mm.
before they came out of paradise. I mean, there's so many things wrong with this, but this just shows the influence that they've had. There was a very influential Dr. Pritikin who had the anti-heart attack diet, which was zero fat. You would boil lean ground meat, you would press it in a towel, boil it again, press it again, boil it again, press it again. Then you'd eat this just ruffled up cardboard. And really he was called the father of plant-based medicine. Well, turns out he was a professor of medicine at Loma Linda Medical School, which is the private medical school for the Seventh day Adventist Church. And you have to be a member of the Seventh day Adventist Church to even apply to this. I was in California at the time when I was applying to medical schools, and I looked at Loma Linda, said, oh, I've never heard of that before. Went on to the application page, and it just said, yep, you're not even allowed to apply unless you have a letter from your deacon from the Seventh day Adventist Church saying you're a member in good standing. I'm like, all right, well,
Wow.
that's out then. Okay.
Yeah.
And I moved on with my life. Um, but he was an advocate of Lena Cooper, or of Lena Cooper, yes, but of Ellen G. White, read all her books, thought that they were amazing. So he's pushing this narrative. The McGovern report, which was the 1977 U.S. Senate report on nutrition, they sort of vilified cholesterol and thereby meat in that paper. That was written by a Seventh Day Adventist church member. We have Dr. Stephen Gundry, who's wrote a book called The Plant Paradox, which is a really interesting book. It's all about
Mm.
plant toxins and lectins and all these other sorts of ways that plants defend. And he says the same things. Plants don't want you to eat them; they defend themselves. You have to be mindful of this, and that's really all I'm trying to do is just make people more mindful. But he named it the plant paradox because it's like, oh, okay, well, we have to eat plants. They're really good for us. Meat's bad, it causes heart disease. So you have to eat plants, but you can't eat plants because plants are
Yeah.
toxic. So it's a paradox. Well, I don't know his religious affiliations, but I do know that he was a professor of medicine at Loma Linda Medical School for 19 years. And you have to be a Seventh day Adventist church member to be a medical student there. So I would expect you'd have to have some sort of affiliations with the church to be a professor of medicine there. And so, and at least be of that mindset. And so that's why it's a paradox to
Mm.
Dr. Gundry, because plants are sent from God and meat is sinful,
Yeah.
right? So, oh, well, what's
Can
going on
I?
here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry to cut in, but can I just ask? Because this is
Mhm.
what goes around in my head. So people like Phil Escott, so I know you know him very well, and
Mhm.
he was a guest on my podcast. And I have to say, he opened the door to carnivore for me because, he's so, you know what Phil's like. He's just so like
Mhm.
matter of fact. He's like, carnivore healed me. Like it saved my life. Like
Yeah.
it is the way to go. But then my question is, that's always going around in my head is are plant foods not great for people like Phil, like completely 100%, and like the Lion Diet, Michaela Peterson, like 100%, she's got to be really careful with plants, otherwise her autoimmunity flares up. But what about the average person? So let's say someone like myself who has been eating plant foods my whole life and I don't really feel any issues. Like I know there's a big oxalates, it's a real problem for a lot of people and I had no idea. But what about people who don't get symptoms from oxalates or don't seem to get any symptoms from plants? Like, is carnivore for everybody?
So, is carnivore for every lion?
I'd say so, yeah.
Is grass for every cow?
Yeah.
Probably. So
Mm.
food is species specific, and you can have certain individuals that do better or worse with inappropriate food for that species, but that doesn't mean that there's different optimal foods. You'll never find a single example in nature of two members of the same species that have different optimal diets. The best that people can ever come up with is that, well, orcas, they'll eat different types of fish, and some will eat fish and some will eat seals. They're still carnivores, first and foremost. Second of all, those are actually different species of orca. That's what people don't actually recognize. Very different. They have different communication. They have different social skills. They don't interbreed. They don't even intermingle in
Mm.
social circles. And so they're actually different species. And one of the defining factors of them being a different species is they actually have very different diets, and that's a definitional term in designating what the differences in species. And so that's a definition in terms. You cannot have two members of the same species that have different optimal diets. Now you can have certain individuals that are eating suboptimal diets out of necessity or choice, but that does not mean that it is the best biological food
Mm.
for them.
I get you.
So the thing is too is that the reason I'd say that the last getting rid of the last 5% makes 95% of the difference is because you don't actually know how much harm it's causing you until you get rid of it and can see it for yourself. So you say, well, I do fine with plants. I don't have oxalate problems. If you
Mm.
cut them out completely, you might just find out how much of a problem you've been having. I never thought I was having a problem with these sorts of things. I was playing high level sports my entire life. I've, been pushing myself academically and physically at every stage of my life. And then all of a sudden, I'm 38 years old and I just cut out all of the plants and I feel better than I did playing professional sports in my mid 20s. And I looked back on my life and realized that compared to what I feel right now, I felt like garbage.
Mm.
And that really, really pissed me off. And that's when I started really looking into this. And for the first 5 years of my 20s, so 20 to 25, I just had stopped eating plants simply because I had a professor of cancer biology at the University of Washington who expressed to us that he didn't eat plants because they were so carcinogenic and they had dozens or hundreds of known carcinogens that were extremely abundant and harmful. And he wouldn't eat plants. He wouldn't let his kids eat plants because, in his words, and this is something that's attributed to me, but it's not me, this was my professor, said plants are trying to kill you. And so that's something that really stuck with me. And I just said, right, screw plants. And I just stopped eating them for 5 years. And I defaulted. Yeah, it's like, I'm not
Just
doing that.
screw plants.
Yeah, I wasn't doing a specific diet. I just like whatever had a plant in it was not getting eaten by me. And so I just defaulted into meat and eggs. And I felt absolutely amazing. I didn't attribute that to, going carnivore because I just was not eating plants. I also stopped drinking at the same time during the rugby season. That obviously made a huge impact. And I thought I basically put all that benefit from not drinking. Obviously, it's a huge benefit, but it's it is something that I only saw later. And so, when people like yourself or like me or like so many other people that are just normal and there's so many people coming to this that have never had problems like Phil, that have
Mm.
never had raging diabetes or autoimmunity, or I never had any of these things, but the the amount that you feel better is staggering.
That
And
is
that's why I say
so
you
like
really,
enticing when you say it. It just makes me think, oh, I've got to cut out those last just to see what you mean.
well, you just try it for 30 days and you'll see what I mean. I work with a lot of professional athletes. There's a gentleman named Ryan Talbot who was a Division I track athlete at Michigan State. So he's already one of the top athletes in the country. He wasn't really feeling his best. He went to the doctor, did a whole bunch of blood tests. Oh, well, everything looks fine. He said, well, I don't feel fine. So obviously there's something going on here that you can't see and measure. And so he got a hold of me. I gave him some advice and he went carnivore mid-season, right in the middle of his track season. And he switched to the decathlon mid-season. And in his second decathlon ever, he was pole vaulting before that. He won the Big Ten NCAA Division I Big Ten championship, set a school record for Michigan State, and earned All-American honors,
Wow.
right? And then he was a three-time back-to-back-to-back All-American in the decathlon after that. And he either came first or second in the Big Ten competition every single year.
Mm.
And he won bronze in the Pan Am Games representing the United States, just missed out on the Olympics. So this is somebody who is already a top level athlete that spurred themselves into a true elite position by just dumping plants. And he even noticed that his testosterone level went from 760. The next year it was 1150. So, people can say all these different things about the how much better or worse, different sorts of metabolic states and food is for their athletic performance. But you cannot tell me that nearly doubling your testosterone as a man is not going to improve your athletic performance.
Mm.
And people do that illegally and risk ruining their health and their careers to try to get that same result. And you can just do that naturally. You can just
Mm.
naturally do that. And I see that all the time. So it's remarkable the difference that it makes in people's lives. And so I have a lot of friends that said, well, I don't have any health issues at the moment. So I don't need to try it yet. It's not just something to heal people that are sick. First of all, you don't even know how sick you are
Mm.
until you get rid of this stuff. You don't realize how bad you feel until you don't feel that way anymore. And I've seen a lot of people say that. There's a British actress, Davinia Taylor, who's sort of moved on to other things. She went carnivore last year, and we did like an IG live together, and she was really interested in it. So she did that. She felt great. Was having all these benefits. And then sort of around, she did for the month of January. And then sometime in, February or something like that, she went out and just had sort of normal food. I think some like pizza or pasta or something like that. And the next day she did this video. She just talking about how awful. She said, I feel awful. Like, and she said that I had no idea how good I felt until right now that it's gone. I had
Mm.
no idea. I'm dumping this stuff. This is awful. I never want to feel like this again. But that's how she felt all the time, and that was just normal for her because we normalize how we feel on a daily basis. So most people have this baseline level of bad that they feel, and that can go up and down as you drink coffee or you do this and you sort of get this little pickup or whatever, and you're working out and you can sort of get these little good spots and little bad spots, but it all sort of averages out. And you think of that as normal because that's normal for you. And so you base every single day based on your norm. Say, today's a good day. Oh, today's not that great a day, but it's all based on that norm. And then you cut out all this garbage, and then you don't feel a little bit better, a lot better. You feel 1,000 times better than you've ever felt in your entire life. And then you look back on what was normal, and you realize that you have felt like trash your
Mm.
entire life. And now looking down at that, you're like, not going back to that. No, thank you. And that's why I have no interest in eating
Mm.
these sorts of things. When you get concerned about, well, what am I have to eat the rainbow. I'm missing out on different nutrients. I have yet to have any plant-based enthusiast explain to me what nutritional deficiency you get from lacking the color purple in your diet or
Mm.
orange. Like, why do you need to eat the rainbow? Those aren't nutrients. That's not, yellow can be made by thousands of different compounds in nature. That's not one thing that you need. Same with purple and every other color. You don't need colors. You need vitamins, minerals, proteins, and fats. That's what you need. And you get every single one of those in the exact proportion you need them from eating fatty meat.
I don't know if you saw, I don't know if you're on Instagram as much as I am, but basically there's a post going around it must be viral because I've seen different people post it. But it gets me really like excited. It's like a really fascinating topic. It's the Diary of the CEO with George
Mm,
Ede, Dr. George
mhm.
Ede. Have you
Yeah.
seen that
Yeah.
clip
She's
about
great.
fiber,
Yeah. Hmm.
the fiber
Yeah.
clip? And so basically, that I've forgotten his name, but the guy, the Diary of the CEO,
Yeah.
he says, we need plants, like we need them for fiber, right? And she's like, why do you need fiber? And he's like, well, for digestion. Well, why do you need? And she literally just, and
Yeah.
the way she does it, okay,
Mm,
Anthony, digestion, right?
mhm.
So. I think one of my biggest fears, and one of the fears of many people I know, is going to the toilet. Like, don't you need fiber to go to the toilet? Um,
Yeah.
that's my weak link in my digestion. Like, if I'm on the wrong toilet, or if it's the wrong time of day, or if I'm on holiday, like I can't go. So I'm kind of scared about taking that final leap because I'm like, I need to go to the toilet. Like, and if I change my diet, surely if I take the fiber out, I'm gonna be blocked up, right?
Mm. So the thing is, though, is the purpose to go to the toilet multiple times a day, or is the purpose to excrete the waste that you have built up in your body?
Yeah, I mean, it's to excrete the waste. Yeah.
Correct. And so
Mm.
people get very nervous when they don't do that every day because they associate that with, well, I'm blocked up. I
Mm.
normally go every day or twice a day, or people say the more the better, and 6 times a day even better, even though that's actually been strongly associated with diverticular disease. The more bowel motions you have a week, more than average of 15 times a week, so more than an average of 2 per day,
Mm.
actually increases your risk dramatically by a factor of 7 or 8. So, 800% increased relative risk ratio um, with diverticulosis, diverticular disease, and increased fiber as well. So the more fiber that you eat actually increases your risk for developing diverticular disease. And when you have diverticulitis, an acute flare-up of diverticulitis or appendicitis or other sorts of bowel issues, you're told day one, stop eating all fiber. You need to go on a low residue diet. You have to rest the bowel and let it chill out. Okay, what does that mean? Because fiber actually is causing more work for your bowel and it can actually stress it out and damage it. And so they say, okay, no fiber at all while you're healing from this, and then back on fiber because you need fiber. Well, if it was so good for you, why wouldn't it help you through that hard time? That doesn't really fit. But you could think of
You're
some
saying you don't
scenarios
need
where,
to go, like people who are on the con,
well, yeah,
like a human being doesn't need to go every
yeah, well,
day.
unless you do, right? Because the
Right.
whole point of it is that you're getting rid of waste. But if you don't have any waste to get rid of, why do you need to go to the bathroom, right?
Hmm.
If you don't need to go, you don't need to go. But people do get very concerned about that because they're used to going every day. And if they don't go every day, that used to mean that they're backed up. And that used to mean they're building up a blockage. And in a few days' time, this was going to hurt. And they were going to have to like basically give birth and it was going to be horrible. And so that's the thought, that's the fear, but that's not actually what's happening. Because when you're eating highly digestible food, which is meat, which is the most bioavailable food, it's the most easy for our body to break down and absorb, actually, for any animal to break down and absorb, it's going to be absorbed. And so, even infants eating meat for the first time, studies show, I found studies from the 1950s showing that infants eating meat as their first meals could actually absorb 98% of the meat that they ate.
Hmm.
So when you're eating plants, 95% of the bulk of a plant is fiber, which is by definition indigestible. You cannot break it down. You cannot absorb it. You cannot use it. It has to be excreted. And so 95% of what you're eating is coming out the back end, where only 2% of what you're eating when you're eating meat comes out the back end, right? So it's a very different scenario. You will just have less waste. And
Hmm.
so it is very normal that you won't go every single day. Now, there's a caveat there because a lot of people get very scared about eating fat because we've been told our entire lives that fat is bad for us and fat causes heart disease and diabetes and cancer and all these other sorts of myths, which have been thoroughly debunked in the top medical journals around the world with randomized controlled trials, meta-analyses, and umbrella studies of randomized controlled trials and meta-analyses of randomized controlled trials. So that's completely out, but people get very worried about that. So they don't eat enough fat and they think, well, I'm eating enough fat because I'm eating more fat than I ever have in my life. And it's like, well, still not enough necessarily. The excess fat that you eat that you can't absorb will make your stool soft. That's
Yeah.
what constipation is. Constipation is not frequency, it's consistency. So it's something called the Bristol stool chart, and it's
Yeah.
about the consistency of your stools. If it's hard, rocky, pebbly, that's very constipated. And if it's just rock hard, that's a different level of constipation. So if it's soft, pliable sort of thing, that's less constipated. That's not constipated, and so on. It goes down the list. But your body has a limited capacity to absorb fat. So people will get worried, well, I don't want to eat too much fat. Well, it's not actually possible to eat too much fat because you're not going to absorb it. Unless you do something silly like take ox bile, which will force you to absorb more fat than you want. but your body can only absorb fat with bile predominantly. You can absorb a small amount of fat without bile, but the vast majority has to be absorbed with bile. When you run out of bile, you only make a certain amount of bile a day from your liver. It's a very slow process to make bile. You will run out eventually. And when you run out, it is physically impossible to absorb the majority of the fat that you eat. And so that will just go out. And so your colon is designed to dry out the sort of food waste coming out of your small intestine. All the digestion and absorption happened in your small intestine. It's over now.
Hmm.
Now it's just compiling this waste, dehydrating it so you can conserve water. So you're not just wasting water because that kills animals more often than anything, dehydration. And so you're trying to pull in that water, and we think, well, we need more fiber to move this through so you don't doesn't dehydrate so quickly. This we have to work against our colon, this evil colon that's trying to dry out our food and make us constipated. Like why would we have to work against our own anatomy and our own biology and our own organs? Why would we need to do that? Why would we need to fight against nature? That doesn't make sense. It
So
means
you're
that means
saying
we're doing
fat.
something wrong.
So you're saying fat is the fiber, basically. So fat
Oh,
is what helps you
exactly.
go, not fiber.
It, well, if that's what keeps it soft,
Right. Okay.
and it will definitely help you go. You can run your own experiment. You just keep
Mm.
eating fat, and eventually it will
What
turn
kind of
into
fat? Because
diarrhea.
I know carnivore is all
Animal fat,
about animal fat. So and it's not
animal
even
fat.
not coconut oil, olive
No,
oil.
no,
No. Okay.
unfortunately
So
not. The
animal fat. So like
thing is that
lard and butter
lard, butter, yeah,
and like the
tallow,
fat
and
of
just
the
the fat in
animal.
the animal. Exactly.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. So things like, grass-fed butter are fine as well for most people. Some people with autoimmunity seem to seem to even have a problem with butter. Usually ghee is fine for
Mm.
everybody. I haven't really come across anybody who's had a problem with
So
ghee.
like
But
how
yeah.
so what's your diet like? So what do you eat in a day? And tell me, how much fat do you add?
Hmm.
Like what's it like?
Oh, yeah. I try to get around 2 grams of fat to 1 gram of protein. So it's a high fat diet.
So
What that
two to
looks like on the
one.
plate, two to one
Yes.
gram. So there's a
2 to
different
1.
number of grams. It's not just by weight on the plate
Okay.
though.
Yeah.
So yeah. So by looking at the plate, 60, if you had 100 grams of meat,
Hmm.
right? 65 of those grams should be the lean muscle. 35 should be the fat. That's going to be 2 grams of fat to 1 gram of protein.
Mm. Okay.
And so that's what you want to aim for. So it's very fatty. So if you had like a 65% ground beef mince or something, which you can't even get that, but like a 70-30 would probably be the fattest that you could get. And that would sort of be around that sort of 1 to 1, a little more than 1 to 1 potentially. An egg, a whole egg is slightly less than 1 gram of fat to 1 gram of protein. So eggs in butter, for
So
instance, would
yeah.
be good. Or egg yolks is a perfect ratio of 2 grams of fat to 1 gram of protein. So having just egg yolks as opposed to the egg white omelet, you have an egg yolk omelet, something
Mm.
like that, and that's
Mm.
going to be
Yeah.
that's going to be perfect as well. So that's what I try to do, and then I gauge it on my bowel motions, as strange as that sounds, and if things start getting more firm and hard, I know that I need to increase my fat. And if things are more loose, then I know that I'm eating a lot more than my body can absorb. And you'll notice that if you eat a lot more fat than your body can absorb, 20 minutes after the meal, you'll probably be going to the bathroom because it just
Mm.
goes right through you. There's a saying, it's an old saying, so most people probably haven't heard of it. It's called it says like quicker than fat through a goose. Like if you give a
Mm.
chunk
I've
of
heard
fat
that.
to a goose, they can't absorb it, it just goes right out. It's like they will poop it out and probably in
Mm.
solid form actually fairly quickly after they eat it, a few minutes or several minutes afterwards. And the same thing with us. We can't absorb more than a certain amount. Once we run out of bile, that has to come out. And it will. And
Mm.
so that
Do you eat?
excess fat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. Do you eat just meat?
Yeah,
So
and eggs. I
just
mean, I'll
meat
have
and
some eggs.
eggs. Yeah.
Eggs are honorary meat because they're all the nutrients and building blocks to then make an animal, which is meat. So
What about
eggs are very good
dairy?
as well. Not much.
Mm.
It's a gray area for carnivore. It is very nutritious. And so, I don't want to slight dairy in that regard because it's extremely nutritious and some people, require those nutrients depending on their circumstances. Raw dairy is very different than pasteurized dairy, but either one has very good nutrients in them. But they can be pro-inflammatory. The casein can be a little inflammatory to us, especially the A1 casein protein. And people with autoimmunity definitely need to stay away from all milk products and even eggs. A lot of people with autoimmunity have problems with eggs. If you have a problem with eggs or you have a problem with dairy, just don't have them.
Mm.
And the baseline is just eating meat. To your point before, I think the best thing you do is just start with just beef and water. Try that for 30 days, and then add in some other things, even chicken
Yeah.
or pork or fish or eggs.
Mm.
Just add them in one at a time and see how you feel with them, and go from there and see if you want to add those in. The baseline being red meat. That's generally the most tolerable for most people. And
Mm.
but dairy it can be pro-inflammatory, especially A1, but A2 is also a bit pro-inflammatory. But that's what we sort of grew up with evolutionarily. The animals that we were cultivating for dairy 12, 15,000, well, 12-ish thousand years ago, they were A2 cows. And so they were making A2 milk. And so now we're switching over to A1 milk, and we don't actually have as much exposure to that. So it's a bit more inflammatory. And then the other thing is that dairy can, again, have lactose, which is carbohydrate, and that can take you out of ketosis. If you're not careful, you can do that. I've absolutely seen people spike their insulin and spike their blood sugar, even with raw milk if they're drinking enough of it, and measure that on their blood tests. And the other thing too is that they have compounds in there called casomorphines, which tell the baby mammal to drink more and drink more and drink more so that it grows big and strong. And that's important for a baby because baby animals are vulnerable. They're the most commonly eaten thing in the wild because they are defenseless basically.
Mm.
And so it's very important for baby animals to grow up as fast as they can. And so that's telling them to eat more, and they get that sort of compulsive desire to eat more. And it also triggers growth. And so you're putting on fat, you're putting on weight and things like that. So that's fine for a baby, that's fine for a young animal, but that's not what we want as adults because it will confuse our hunger signals, and it will tell us to sort of grow and compulsively eat when we don't actually need to or want to. And so, especially when people are trying to lose body fat, that
Mm.
can be a stall on weight loss and fat loss. But again, just if you're otherwise healthy and slim and sort of where you want to be, and you just start off eating just meat, and you want to add in some yogurt or some
Yeah.
some whatever, um, try it, see how you feel
So,
with it, see if
yeah.
it causes a problem, and just pay attention to it and be mindful of those issues. So it's a bit of a gray area. I
So
think most
dairies for
people do,
some, not for others. You just got to
and
test it out
and try to
yourself.
use it and try to use it sparingly.
Okay.
It's whenever I say like, yes, you can have some dairy, but try to limit it, people just go, oh, I can have dairy, and they just eat blocks of cheese. I
Yeah.
literally had I saw it, so I swear to God, I had three people in one week tell me that basically all they were eating was just bags of halloumi cheese. And it was just like, I'm sorry, what? And I was asking them, it was like, well, how's the diet going? Like,
People are
well,
so
it's all
funny.
right. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
was like, were you losing weight? Is that what's going on? Like, no, not really. I mean, I guess it's all right, but yeah, I'm not really having the results other people are. Like, okay, well, what exactly are you eating? Like, halloumi. And I was just like, halloumi? Like, well, what else are you eating? I was like, no, that pretty much just halloumi.
That's
I'm like,
it.
wait, hold
Halloumi.
on a second. They literally Costco was selling buckets of
Right.
3 kilos of halloumi cheese,
Yeah.
and they were
And they
literally
took their
eating
opportunity.
halloumi
They're like,
by the
yes.
bucket. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're just
Oh,
eating halloumi by the bucket. I'm like, okay,
that
no,
is
you
so
can't do that.
funny.
Dairy has a lot of nutrients, but it doesn't have all the nutrients. You can't just like live on
Okay, right. So there is
pasteurized
that.
cheese,
Yeah.
and
I
yeah, so
mean,
use it as a condiment and rarely.
okay, as a condiment. Okay, I like that
Yeah.
because that kind of gives a good impression of how it should be. It should be an afterthought rather than, base your diet on
Yeah,
it.
it's
Yeah.
not the meal. Meat
It's
is the
not the
meal.
meal. Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned ketosis, and I thought that'd be a
Mm.
really good chance to kind of go over into ketosis. So ketosis is by default a state in which your body goes into when you're on the carnivore diet, mostly, right? Because, it's got to be super high fat and, moderate protein, would you say? Like in relation to like the
Yeah.
ratios. Yeah.
In relation to the fat. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, ketones and ketosis. So I am so fascinated and enchanted by the idea of ketosis. I'm not even sure if I've been in ketosis. I've tried the keto diet in the past, but I don't even know if I really reached that stage, like in deep ketosis, like when everyone talks about that amazing feeling you get. I'm just not sure. I don't know. Maybe I have, maybe I haven't. But it's something that I want to do now. It's something I want to get into. I saw a lecture you did, and it was a very recent one. It was about athletes on doing their sport and competing in ketosis. And it was such a good presentation, and it just really made me think, I've got to try this ketosis. I'm going to give it a go. Because it sounds like so basically it's a natural state that your body goes into when it's low in sugar, right?
Mhm.
And then it's just an energy source that your body turns to when it doesn't have the sugars available. And it's a very clean energy source and it doesn't have many byproducts, and you feel great when you're in ketosis. So, in your words, what is ketosis? You might want to talk about what a ketone is. But then also, my other question is it good to be in ketosis all the time, or should you kind of cycle in and out of it?
Um, well, the thing is that I don't consider ketosis an alternate metabolic state that our body just slips into when we don't have dietary carbohydrates. Really, a carbohydrate-driven metabolic state is what happens when we've actually overwhelmed our system with carbohydrates,
Mm,
and actually to a toxic level. So carbohydrates are actually toxic to the body past a certain level. In our entire circulatory system, if you have a normal blood sugar, you have about 4 grams of glucose in your entire circulatory system. And that's all the glucose that your body requires for every single physiological process of your body and your brain. So it's not much. In fact, the predominant energy source is fat and ketones. That's our storage form of energy. Is fat. It's much more uh, well, it's much more available energy, but it's a much more efficient storage form of energy. From my lecture that you saw, I spoke about athletes and being able to maximally store glycogen with carb loading and all these sorts of things. The maximum storage potential of glycogen in your liver and your muscles for a 65 kilo athlete at 6% body fat is about 2,400 kilocalories of
well,
energy. But the fat storage on that same 65 kilo athlete at only 6% body fat is 35,000 kilocalories. So this is a
wow.
much more efficient energy storage form. Now, we're taught, and I was taught, that well, your fat is just this emergency backup if you're starving in the desert and you just can't survive, and that's an alternate state. Well, the only reason we call it an alternate, that's a value judgment that someone has ascribed to it. That doesn't actually
Mm,
mean that that's the case. The fat in all animals around the world is the normal storage form of energy, and you eat things and you put some of that energy into fat so that you can use that fat energy later. And that's what animals do. And so you eat things, you store fat, you run on that fat. And it's like filling up your car at the gas station. That's like you don't just have, you know, it, when you're eating carbohydrates, you literally lock off that fat. You can't run on
yeah,
that
you
anymore.
lock your fat
You lock it.
cells. Yeah.
Yeah, because the insulin, if your insulin is elevated, you physically cannot access your fat stores and burn your fat. Dr. Georgia Ede, who's a Harvard trained psychiatrist, was a professor at Harvard as well, and before she moved on, she talks about this. Your insulin goes up, you cannot burn fat at all. It's chemically impossible to burn your fat until your insulin comes down. And so that's like the analogy to that is if you have like a tanker truck with
Mm,
all this petrol behind it, all this gasoline behind it, it's got 50,000 gallon tank behind it going to fill up all these other gas stations, but its gas tanks are only 50 gallons. And so it can run out of gas and be on the side of the road and have to call for a tow truck,
mm,
even though there's 50,000 gallons right behind it. So that's very ironic. Well, that's us when we eat carbs. And so
mm,
we can run out of energy, we can run out of glucose, we can run out of glycogen, And we've got 50,000 gallons of fuel right behind us in our
But
fat
we
stores. We
can't
can't
access
access
it.
it. Can't access it. So that sort of defeats the purpose. And it's not efficient for an athlete or for anybody just living their normal lives. So I don't think that ketosis is an alternate metabolic state. The only reason we call it an alternate fasting metabolic state is because by the time we were able to look at our metabolism at a molecular level, everybody was eating everybody was eating carbohydrates. And so I said, oh, when you eat, it looks like this. And when you don't eat, it looks like this. This is a fed metabolism. This is a fasting metabolism, which is those are the terminology used when I was taking biochemistry. And yet that ignores the fact that if you eat anything else on earth besides carbohydrates, it also looks like your so-called fasting metabolism. And so now my niece is actually has been taking biochemistry. She's pre-med at University of Washington, and she was actually telling me that they don't call it a fed and a fasting state anymore. They call it a carbohydrate metabolism and a non-carbohydrate metabolism, which is much more accurate. If
Interesting.
you and again, I think that's probably more accurate than calling it ketosis because we're 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 latching on to the ketone aspect of the ketosis, which is fine, but that's really just the least of the descriptors that you could use. Yes, there are ketones there, but there's so many more things going on. Insulin is a very busy hormone. Insulin affects hundreds of different physiological processes in your body and your brain. It doesn't just drive energy into cell. It does do that, but it also does hundreds of other processes in your body and affects hundreds of other hormones and processes in your body. And so when you elevate that artificially because you have to protect yourself from elevated glucose, it's now made all these others, and now it's out of balance for all these other physiological processes, and everything goes wrong. And so when you normalize that and you balance out your blood sugar and you balance out your insulin, everything else goes into balance as well. And so there's so many other physiological processes that go out. Really, what that metabolic state is not ketosis, it's a fat burning state. Now you can go through gluconeogenesis, you can make blood sugar, you can make glycogen, now you can make ketones as well, which are the primary fuel source of your body and your brain. People don't realize that because they think, well, we're in our primary metabolism, our fed metabolism, these things are running on glucose. And so it's only when you're fasting that it switches to ketone. So that's a backup. No, because when you have both together, you have an abundant amount of ketones and you have abundant amount of glucose. 2/3 of your brain will only run on ketones.
Mm,
100% of your heart will only run on ketones, and your intestines and many of your other organs and even your muscles. 90% of the energy they'll get, it comes from fat oxidization when
really?
you're ketogenic.
Mm,
Even up to over 90% VO2 max, elite athletes in ketosis will still be burning fat. And so that's with glucose available.
mm,
So these tissues are choosing and preferring ketones over the available glucose. So that's a preference, that's a priority, that's our primary energy fuel source for those tissues. There are still tissues that use glucose, and that's why we make glucose, but we make the exact amount of glucose that we need. We don't need any more than the amount that we make. And when you get more than those 4 grams, if you go up even 1 gram up to 5 grams, that's diabetes.
mm,
And that 1 extra gram is a toxic dose to your body, and your body responds to it as a toxin by trying to detoxify it by elevating insulin. It would be all well and good if the only thing insulin did was lower blood sugar, but it's not. Like I said, there's hundreds of different things that it affects. And so our bodies are trying to protect us from this toxic level of glucose. And so we, again, only need 4 grams at any given time. And even 1 extra gram will cause harm. Those glucose molecules and any carbohydrate molecules can physically fuse to other molecules. It's called glycation. And so you get
mm,
advanced glycation end products. This is what kills diabetics, this buildup of advanced glycation end products. So this damages your vasculature, damages your nervous system, damages your organs because it's damaging the vasculature and it's cutting off blood supply to capillaries and smaller vessels. And so this is why diabetics' toes sort of lose blood supply and they hair starts falling off their legs and they lose loses to the point that their toes rot off and fall off. They have to get their feet amputated and their legs, and then they're up to their, above their knee, and then their kidneys fail. The number one cause of kidney failure is diabetes. And so now your kidneys are failing, you go on dialysis, you have to get a kidney transplant, you get liver failure, you get heart disease, type 3, or Alzheimer's is now being called type 3 diabetes,
Yeah.
hormonal dysfunction and infertility called PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is the number one cause of infertility in women worldwide, is from insulin resistance. Insulin disrupts estrogen production. So it actually blocks estrogen production and increases testosterone in women. It does the opposite in men. And so now you're getting too much testosterone, not enough estrogen in women, and you become infertile and you go through premature menopause. So women are going into menopause younger and younger and younger. And it's because this elevated insulin is blocking estrogen. And so you have all these problems. You get diabetic retinopathy, you go blind. All of these problems are a product of elevated blood sugar.
Mm.
And so your body is desperately trying to keep that down. And so it elevates your insulin, which then causes all these other problems. And so going into a state of ketosis, or really just our natural metabolic state, gets rid of all of that.
Right.
And so that's one of the major, major benefits by going into ketosis. And really what you're doing is you're just allowing yourself to run on your fat stores.
So
Because
everybody needs
regardless,
to, I mean, so I'm just stating the obvious here, but everyone needs to basically do this. Like everyone needs to get onto that
I would
side
say
of their
so. Yeah.
metabolism, like everybody. And then that's, I mean,
Yeah.
there's
For
probably some
for the most
caveats that are,
benefits. Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, I guess it depends on what you consider a need. I mean, some people like Phil is just like, yeah, he needs to do this. Like
he needs
it'll
to,
kill
yeah.
him if he doesn't, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is that, if you feel fine and you like your life and this, that, and the other, then fine.
Then
But
yeah.
if you want to be optimal, if you want your body to work as well as it ever will for as
Mm.
long as it can, then yeah, that's exactly
Let's
what
say
you need to
somebody's
do.
like, oh, I just want to lose some weight. Then that's the
Mhm.
answer.
It can definitely help. I mean, the thing is that, if your insulin is too high, you can't lose fat. You just can't do
Yeah.
it. And so, starving yourself and limiting what you're eating, what you're doing is you're sort of getting yourself into a state where your insulin is down low enough that you can start burning fat again. So intermittent fasting, just running out the clock on the
Mm.
insulin. You eat once a day and insulin spikes up for about 24 hours. And so at least for a couple hours during that day, you might start to burn some fat. And that's usually when you work out right before your next meal, sort of 23 hours after your meal, then you work out. And then intermittent fasting really is one day a week you don't eat at all. So you have a
Mm.
48-hour fast. You go from Thursday night to Saturday night without eating. Okay, well, now in that time, you're going to have a good 24 to 28 hours where you're actually burning fat, right? Because your insulin is low enough. And so that can actually help you. And people find a lot of success with this. But if you just don't eat carbs, you'll always be in that
Mm.
fat burning state regardless of your ketones. Most people do find that their ketones get elevated, but the longer you're in ketosis, the more efficient you are using your ketones. It's not that you're
Mm.
making less ketones, but your body uses those ketones more. It's called fat adaptation. That's something,
Yeah.
especially as an athlete, that you need to take into consideration, that it takes a few weeks before you're going to start utilizing that energy very well. And then after months and years, you're going to be using it even better and more efficiently as you go. And so your ketone levels over time start to reduce. And so, because I think it's a misnomer calling it ketosis, when your ketone levels aren't, you know, 3.6, but oh, I'm not in ketosis anymore. What do I got? Well, are you making blood sugar? Are you making glycogen? Do you have any ketones at all? Are you dead? Well, then if you're, if all those things are, fine, then you're in ketosis. You're in that metabolic state where you're running on your fat. The Inuit, they say, well, the Inuit, they only eat meat and they eat about 50% of their meat by weight is fat. So they're actually getting 3, 4 grams of fat per gram of protein. So very high fat diet. They don't have anything else to eat because what else are you going to eat besides seal and things like that in the
Yeah.
Arctic Circle, right?
Is ketosis, I know you don't particularly like that term, but is ketosis a safe state to be in for women constantly? Because
Yeah, of course.
we see a lot of health professionals out there on podcasts and very reputable people, especially hormone specialists, female hormone specialists saying, ketosis isn't great. You've got to come out, you're going to harm your cycle, you're going to harm your hormones. What would you say about that? Just to kind of give some,
Yeah, it's hot
comfort.
garbage. Yeah, it's
Right.
complete and utter nonsense. Yeah, no,
Mm.
Think about it this way, so again, look at the Inuit, right? So I mean, these are people that are alive in the Arctic Circle right now. We can see what they eat. We can observe them directly. What carbs are they getting, you know, for 2 weeks a month, every month to help their hormones? Do they have babies? Are there more Inuit? Right? Has there been more than one generation of the Inuit or the Nanette? It is our natural state. Humans became humans because of the ice ages, and that forced Homo habilis to become apex predators. All the other early humans that were more plant based all died out. Every single one is dead now, right?
Mm.
Only Homo habilis made it, and it was because of the ice ages, and they became apex predators, and they became carnivores, right? And people think, and people will argue, you'll hear the vegans say this sort of thing. Well, no, during the ice ages, people moved down towards the equator where all the fruit was. That's completely made up. They just want that to be true because it would support their ideology, but it's actually incorrect. The fossil record is very clear that as the ice shelves were coming down, Homo habilis went up into the ice. And so that completely blows that away. We know that humans have been alive and thriving in the Arctic Circle during the ice ages. The Inuit, the Native Americans, the Native South Americans, they migrated to the Americas over the land bridge during the ice ages from Asia to North America in the Arctic Circle during an ice age, to the point that there was land available. There's this ice bridge that went across. So they're walking on ice in the Arctic Circle during an ice age. What exactly are they getting as a carbohydrate source every month? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. It would
Yeah.
have to be natural as well. Before we had nutritionists and people going online saying, oh, this is what you have to do and you have to tweak. If you need a complex diagram or a formula or something else to figure out what to eat, you're eating the wrong thing. If you need a calculator to figure out what to eat, you're eating the wrong thing. I have yet to see a koala pull out a calculator to figure out its macros, right? If there's not something that we can do in nature on our own intuitively, it's not our natural diet. It's not biologically appropriate. So there would have to be some sort of internal cue for
Mm.
women to just say, oh, I need this part of the animal more, or I need to eat this tuber or something like that. And it would have to be available on every continent, in every climate, all over the world at the exact same time. Nothing like that exists. There is no plant that fits that description. And yet humans have thrived in all of those conditions throughout the past several million years. We've been in the Arctic Circle, in the ice ages, and at the equator at the same time, and thrived. So the same things have to be available for optimal performance and health in all of those climates. You do not just eke out survival during an ice age. You either thrive or you die. And we not only thrived, we became the most dominant species that has ever existed during the ice ages, and because of the ice ages, because that forced our ancestors to manifest our destiny as apex predators. And
Mhm.
so if we were not able to survive like that, if we boxed our hormones and we weren't able to menstruate and have babies, where did all those people come from? Right? How did those people over thousands and thousands of years slowly migrate over the land bridge into North America, and then over thousands of years come down during the ice ages if they weren't able to procreate? And I see the direct evidence against that in my clinical practice, because I see women who are, I'll give an example. I had a woman who was 38 years old. She was in perimenopause at 38. She had PCOS. She was, slightly overweight. And, she was trying to do this for weight loss, but her hormones were just in shambles. Her, IGF-1 growth hormone was that of like a 70-year-old woman. And she was in perimenopause. So, it was just equivalent to, someone in her 50s. From an estrogen point of view, she had barely detectable estrogen. It was 88. The lowest cutoff is 85 here in Australia. And she's 38. She
Mm.
hadn't had periods in forever. And, she was having a lot of problems. She went ketogenic carnivore for 4 months. And after that, her estrogen went from 88, again, which is 3 points above, non-detectable. It jumped up to 650, and now she had normal periods again, and all
Wow.
her other hormones, and her IGF-1 went back to that of a healthy 25-year-old woman, where it was that, that of a 70-year-old prior to that. And all her other hormones and everything like that improved as well. And so she normalized her periods. She's having perfectly normal periods. I have patients that are saying they don't even have period pain anymore. And
Yeah.
then when they're pure on that, there are women in Western countries from European descent or African descent or Latin Americans, any descent, they're all having babies on carnivore. We've had ketogenic diets going on for decades. We have Atkins for decades. We've had carnivore diets for decades. We've had people pushing ketogenic diets for health and diabetes, et cetera, since the 1700s. People don't realize that. We've used ketogenic diets to treat various medical conditions such as diabetes and epilepsy for over a century, migraines for over a century, other neurological issues for over a century. And yet we don't see any of these hormonal issues. People look at different sorts of things, say, well, if you look at down here, this little sort of at the mechanistic level, there's this one process here, and you see this influenced by this, and so you can explain this entire complex organism with tens of trillions of cells and hundreds of trillions of chemical interactions in all of those cells and tissues going on every single second, and I can explain everything by this one little line of metabolic code. I was like, no, you can't. You
Mm.
absolutely cannot. And so, insulin again suppresses estrogen. So why are we saying that that's beneficial to a woman's estrus? We're saying that we want to suppress that. We want to jack their testosterone too high and suppress their estrogen production. That helps somehow. No, it doesn't. Your body
Mm.
knows what it's doing. Your body doesn't need to be micromanaged. You don't have to, chemically suppress certain hormonal functions because you think that that's where it needs to switch and transition. Maybe someone's saying, well, okay, well, as you're ovulating, now you need to eat carbs to suppress that horrible, evil estrogen, or else your body won't know how to do it. Your body's fine. Your body knows
Mm.
what it's doing. It's been doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing since humans have been humans, and you're not doing anything new. You're not gonna discover something. There's nothing new under the sun. The only thing that you can do is cause harm. Leave it alone. The body is natural. We're natural organisms and beings. We are here either by the grace of God or nature, and either way we work. And if we
Mm.
allow ourselves to work, we will work. And it's only when you start disrupting it and doing things that are outside of our nature that things go wrong. So the best thing to do, you don't have to have any sort of fancy degrees in nutrition or biology or anything like that to understand what an animal has to eat. You just need to look at what that animal has been eating for the longest period of time, and that's what it should continue eating. Humans have been apex predators for over 2 million years. Apex predators are by definition carnivores. We don't need to do some sort of nutritional survey study and ask lions what they've eaten for the last year and all these sorts of things. You just look at what lions eat in nature. And then
Mm.
in the zoo and captivity, that's what you should replicate. Same with the koala and the same with humans. So what do humans eat in nature when they have access to it? They eat meat. And
Mm.
even hunter-gatherers that gather plants and honey and things like that, they hunt first. So you look at the Hadza, they start every day with a hunt. And if that hunt is unsuccessful, then they start going looking for honey. And the women are going around gathering tubers and different sorts of things as well. And so if the hunt is unsuccessful and they cannot find meat, they have those alternatives because they need to eat, they need to live,
Mm.
they need to survive. And humans are adaptable. We do come from an herbivorous past, but it's 8 million years ago. Well, look at our closest our relative, the chimpanzee. Eat how they eat. No, that was 8 million years ago. Sorry. And we split away from them because we started eating more meat and they kept eating plants. And if you really want to eat like a chimpanzee, chimpanzees are cannibals. They eat other chimpanzees, typically alive, and other monkeys as well. And so if you want to eat like a chimpanzee, I guess you have to go and cannibalize your neighbors at any opportunity. It's ridiculous making that sort of statement. You want to look at what humans have been eating. And
Mm.
humans have been eating for the longest period of time, predominantly meat when they've had that available. During different periods of time, you'll see in the fossil record, oh, there's a bit of, grains in the teeth of Neanderthals and all that sort of, that's recently, that's very recently. And just because you have some of that stuff stuck in your teeth doesn't mean that
That's your
98.9% of what
diet.
you were eating
Mm.
aside from that wasn't meat.
Mm.
And again, what was available, what grains were available during the ice ages in the Arctic Circle? If you can't answer that, then you shouldn't be eating it, right?
Mm.
You know, we know that we can survive on that. You can eat other things as an alternate source as a survival mechanism, and that's what we've been doing, and that's why a lot of people have been able to survive through very harsh times because we've been able to eat other things and survive on that. If a lion, you know, doesn't can't get a kill, it can't just go around grazing on grass. It can't eat that. It'll just die. So we have a survival benefit because we can eat more plants than other animals can. But that doesn't mean that they're 100% good for us. It doesn't mean that they come without consequences, and it doesn't mean that they're optimal. It just means that we can survive, and that's great because survival is very important. But that it is a very different argument to what is optimal if you can get it.
Mm. Well said. Well said.
Yes.
And you actually answered a lot of questions that I've always had about, tribes that do eat plants, and you answered that, so that was great. So we talk about female hormones, we talk about how, ketosis is fine in that case, like all month long. Um, but what about the risks of the carnivore diet? So, okay, here. So obviously you train and you're a big guy. You obviously eat enough calories, like you have the appetite and you can eat. But being on the carnivore diet or even a keto diet, it's known to kill your appetite. And so therefore, would you agree that the risk for a woman that she has is, especially if she's active, and especially if she's interested in fasting, she's into that. I'm just basically describing myself. She's active, likes a bit of fasting here and there, and just doesn't have much of an appetite because I eat very high. She eats very high protein, high fat, and what's the risk there though for a woman like that, like a typical woman who just wants to do everything, um, and you know she's probably losing some weight and maybe he's gone a bit too far in the past. Is that a risk, like losing your appetite? And just how do you stay active and juggle all that?
So, the thing is that you mentioned Georgia Eat earlier, and how she sort of asked me, was like, well, what about fiber? Don't you need fiber? Like, why do you need fiber? It's
Mm.
really good to re-ask those questions. Instead, and it's very difficult to prove. You can't prove a negative, right? But so the thing is that a lot of other people haven't proved the counter arguments. They say, well, ketosis is bad because of X, and meat is bad because of X. And it's like, well, is it? Okay, well, what's the evidence for that? Why is that? And there isn't really good answers for that. The thing is that, does it actually kill the appetite? Or are you satiated? Are you getting the nutrients that your
Satiated,
body
yeah.
requires? And your body's saying, yeah, that's enough. Is the converse true that in fact eating carbohydrates and spiking your insulin and blocking leptin, which is the satiety hormone, is that artificially raising your appetite and making you overeat
Mm.
compulsively, and that's actually not appetite. And that's why you overeat, and that's why it's very easy for people to put on weight and gain weight. And this is something that's been taken advantage of by the food industry. They have designed food to be compulsive and to make you want to eat more and more because it sells more product. They don't care about you. They don't care about your health. They don't care about you putting on weight and having to go on diabetes medication. In fact, they profit from that because they're double dipping. They're invested in the pharmaceutical industries and vice versa, right? And so they have no problem with you going on medications to thwart these issues that come up from eating this garbage. So it's actually the other way around. We are now experiencing a normal appetite
Mm.
as opposed to just being ravenous all the time. Now, it is the case that because of that contrast, and you normally feel like you starving, so you have to eat, have to eat, have to eat. Now you don't feel that. So you're just like, I actually feel fine. I don't really feel like I even need to eat. You can undereat because you just don't feel starving all the time because you're not
That's
giving
what,
yourself those
yeah,
inappropriate signals.
I'd say
But the
that's what
thing
I'm
is,
getting at. Yeah.
yeah. So the thing is, you have to relearn your hunger signals. because they are there. They're just very different. They're very subtle. And so you can go by taste. And so again, this has to be natural. It has to, nature's natural. It just happens all on its own. So if it can't happen on its own, it's not natural. And
Mm.
so, we have to look at like, oh, I have to limit what I'm eating. No animal's going to limit what they're eating in the wild.
Mm.
And people say like, well, that's because food is so scarce. Like, yeah, it's just this barren wasteland out there. I guess it's just, yeah, there's no there's almost nothing. It's just one big desert. No, of course that's not true. Resources are can actually be quite abundant. And I mean, think of a koala. It sits in a tree that is its food source. They have no natural predators. They're just sitting on their ass all day. They don't even do anything.
I
All
want to
they
come
can
back
do
as
is
a
just,
koala. Like,
yeah, well,
let's
that's
face
it. They just
it.
have to, they sleep, eat, and mate, and they just they don't have to do anything else. They don't have to worry about anything. And so they could just keep eating and keep eating, keep eating until they're fat, bloated hogs, and yet they don't. If that were the case, they wouldn't have any sort of self-control, or they would need self-control to stop that. You look at that as like, oh, you'd see random fat koalas that just with diabetes and gout and things like that. You don't see that. Oh, that's Dave. He just has no self-control. He's eating all those that eucalyptus. That doesn't happen. There's something internally that tells him to stop. King lion, the head of the pride, they get to eat first. If you watch nature videos, you'll see that the king lion gets to eat first. It's called the lion's share. He gets to eat the first of what he wants, as much as he wants of what he wants, right? It's called the lion's share. And so king lion gets to eat. Everything else is just like desperately waiting, and they're just so anxious, but they don't go near because they'll get messed up by daddy lion. King lion could eat that whole thing and just sit there with a bloated gut and a beer belly and just go, oh my God, and just be vomiting meat. It ate so much, but it doesn't. It eats as much as it wants to, and then just something tells it to stop. And then the rest of them come in and rip the rest of it apart. And they stop exactly when they're supposed to. Oh, well, that's because they're getting all this exercise. Male lions are notoriously lazy. They don't do
Mm.
all that much, and that doesn't explain animals in the zoo. Animals in the zoo live in a box the size of a small room. That's the definition of a sedentary lifestyle, and yet they don't get fat. I've never seen a fat zebra, never seen a fat giraffe, I've never seen a fat lion. They're ripped and muscular like they're on steroids, and that's because they're eating what they're supposed to eat. They're eating their natural diet. So when you're eating your natural diet, you should have some sort of internal cue. And so what I've found is that's taste. And you get feedback from your taste response on when that food is good. Now, you can have bad food that's been chemically altered to give you a yes, this is
Yeah.
good for you signal all the time, like junk food is, but that's not real food. We're talking real food. So your body doesn't track calories. It doesn't. You have stretch receptors, but that's not what's coming down. The main thing that was a myth back in the 80s to make you eat fiber. It said, oh, when your stomach stretches out, it releases leptin, which tells your brain you're satiated, and that's when you stop. So eat a whole bunch of fiber because there's no calories in it, and that's a perfect weight loss diet. So eat a whole bunch of fiber and you'll lose a whole bunch of weight. It's not actually true. It never was true. In fact, the obesity rate has skyrocketed ever since that advice was given out. Not just because of that advice, but in the era of that advice. And and so the thing is that your stomach actually tracks nutrients. Your body tracks nutrients. It doesn't track calories. And you have receptors in your stomach that track up the brain via the vagus nerve and actually tracks nutrients, macro and micronutrients, vitamins, minerals, proteins, and fats, and tells your brain, hey, this is how much is coming down the pipeline. And so you don't have to just keep eating, keep eating, keep eating until you get enough in your bloodstream. And now you've got 5 times that much coming down the pipe as well. Okay. Obviously, your body's much more sophisticated than that, and much more sophisticated than the people giving dietary advice generally are. And so your stomach can track this. And so you get negative feedback to your taste buds. So this is why you try this. If you just try just eating meat, make your favorite steak like big ribeye, something like that, something just amazing.
Yeah.
First bite, if you're hungry, like don't eat the first meal of that day, have it for dinner, and you just eat that. That first bite will be the best thing you've ever tasted. It's going to be amazing. Second
Mm.
bite's going to be nearly the same. And you're going to go down and it's going to taste amazing, amazing, really good, good, okay, all right. And you're going to get to a point where you take a bite of that same steak, cooked at the same time, that's still warm, it's just going to taste a little bland. You're just like, I'm not really enjoying this anymore. Why is that? It's the same meat cooked at the same time in the same conditions, and it's still warm. Why would it taste differently? If we're saying that this is just you're just getting this chemical interaction, bam, this is going to give this one-to-one signal. It should taste like absolutely amazing all the way through. And oh yes, your body just is always living in scarcity, so you need to overeat and overeat and overeat all the time, and that's what your body is doing. That's where we're prone to obesity. Total garbage.
Mm.
Your body will tell you exactly when to stop. Now you'll feel satiated long before that. You'll
Mm.
feel like you can stop long before that. And when we live in an era of toxic compulsive food that's highly addictive and causes compulsive eating, that's what you have to do. You have to get to the point where look, I can stop, so I should stop, or I'm going to put on weight and I'm
Yeah.
going to put it on fat and I'm going to eat too much. So that's what sometimes people do when they're eating a carnivore diet. And so when they feel that they can stop, they should stop. But that's
Mm.
not true. You want to do the opposite now. You want to keep eating until you take a bite that just tastes like cardboard and you don't want to eat anymore. You want to stop. So don't stop because you can stop. Stop because you want to stop. And that's the trick for getting enough. And that's you'll if you do that, you will maintain your lean body mass and even put on lean body mass, all while losing body fat.
Mm. That sounds good. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a really good tip because people find it so difficult to manage their portion sizes. It's such a tough thing, but just you've kind of wrapped it up nicely, as to how to actually manage your eating habits, which is really cool. Oh, Anthony, I mean, that was so great. It was exactly what I thought it would be. And
Oh,
you've
good.
answered literally every question that I had. So I just wanted to thank you so much for this conversation. It was so great. How can people follow you? I mean, you're all over the internet, so it's not difficult, but how do you prefer people to follow you?
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Well, I've my social media accounts, Instagram and Twitter. I'm most active on. Instagram is just Anthony Chaffee MD. Twitter is Anthony underscore Chaffee. And then my YouTube, of course, I have my YouTube channel. I post, multiple times a week, new videos, and then sometimes clips because sometimes I'll have like a 3 hour sort of video, and then maybe I'll take like a 15-minute clip of something, interesting, and I'll sort of put that out, and so people don't have to, sort of
Yeah,
sift
watch this
through
whole
hours and hours
thing.
of stuff.
Yeah.
And then there's new interviews and podcasts every week, at least once a week, if not twice a week. And then, yeah, my podcast is, and my YouTube channel is just Anthony Chaffee MD, and my podcast is just called the Plant Free MD, sort of to try to get that sort of impression
Yeah.
about plants not being great.
Thank you so much. That was such a great conversation.
Yeah. Oh, you're very welcome, and thank you for having me.